This is a game we're in. We're all playing parts here, but this isn't who we are. I had died. I had bought the farm. I was home. I was finally home. And it is an enormous upgrade.
You had an amazing near-death experience. Tell us the story.
Yeah, I'd love to. I was a fireman since the 70s. I was working for the Santa Barbara County Fire Department. In 1994, I was working at Station 11 in Santa Barbara. And we were running calls. We had paramedics on board. And it was a pretty good flu season. You know, we didn't have pandemics back then. We had every 3 or 4 years, we'd have a bad flu season. And this was a really bad one. We were running calls and people were pretty sick. It came in waves and it filled up the emergency rooms, the hospitals. And we went on a patient and she was really ill and I took her breath in directly. I was breathing in, she was exhaling, and we got her to the hospital. She turned out great, but a few days later, I had what she had and I got really sick really fast. Within a couple of days, I was literally circling the drain. I was hard to get out of bed. My pulse was racing. My blood pressure was tanking. I had trouble talking and I got to a phone and it was just a whisper. I called my family for help and my guys arrived, the Santa Barbara County Fire. They got me in an ambulance. They got some IVs started. I was severely dehydrated. This is what that flu, why it was such a killer. People were dehydrating incredibly fast. They got me to the hospital, got me in a room. They came by and they pushed something for nausea and something for pain. I came in there on my knees as far as blood pressure and it just tanked my system. My wife was there by then and she said it was immediate. Your eyes rolled back and you were gone. They couldn't get you back. So they came in and gave you a bunch of Narcan several times to try to erase what they put in you and nothing worked. She said the number I heard that I wrote down was 40/0 for a blood pressure. You know, if it gets below 80, you're gonna have trouble pretty much staying conscious. So I was out cold. They kept pumping the fluids with IVs and they put me in intensive care. You know, I didn't know anything. It was about 3:30 in the afternoon. I didn't know anything from, you know, that point forward. But the next thing I remember, and I'm just guessing, it was 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning or something, I was flying through this star-filled realm. It was just a sea of stars and we call them orbs, divine beings, souls. I was just flying through the middle of this group and they were just showering me with welcoming and love and praise. And it's just everything that a person ever wants to feel here on Earth that was just your natural state. And I was being paraded through all of these stars and all of these colors and emotions were flowing. And everything about me that was on the negative side, things like jealousy or sorrow or sadness or all of that stuff had completely disappeared. It had completely evaporated. It was only this exhilarating, joyful euphoria. I've used the word cosmic orgasm, but that's the only thing that comes close to that feeling. It was just a standing wave of euphoria, of pure love. We are these conscious little bits of light, and we return to that sea, that flow of pure love, and that's what it feels like. Ecstasy. I felt like as I was flying along, I was just shaking my head going, what was that? You know, this life as Bill. That was tough. That was gnarly. And, you know, there's nothing has been tough or gnarly about my life. It's been a dream life. But to come into this world and to take on those lower energies that don't exist in the universe, they exist only here. These things with the ego, with competition and jealousy and selfishness and even willfulness, pushing our weight around to get our way or to get what we want. Those things don't exist. What we want on the other side is to just fit in and to give. And when we find that here, it can be heaven on earth. So I was flying along and I was having this cosmic experience. I felt like I'd been released from a hot, dark, stuffy closet. It was an amazing thing. There was like a cool breeze blowing through every atom of my body, and like someone was pouring honey all over my brain, and it was running down through all my nerves, and everything was perfect. The biggest thing was, how in the world did I forget who I really was? How was it possible that this game that I was involved in, this trick of being a person, how was it possible that that was so complete, where I was completely immersed in that personality of Bill? I wasn't Bill, and it seemed like it was just kind of an illusion or a game. And I don't want to downplay any of our lives, because they are important. What we're doing here is very important. But when you return, you realize there were never any problems. You were never less than perfect the whole time. So I'm flying along and I'm loving life, and I'm thinking, man, I can do this forever. And then I landed. I landed in a place that was very different. It was solid. It had indirect lighting. There was equipment there, and you could see detail, and there were beds, and it was like a medical facility. It was like a clinic of some sort. I was very confused because this was just all of a sudden, it was like a dimensional change. I just went to another channel. And right in front of me, there were these three extremely happy little hooded guys. They had big smiles on their face, and they had bright eyes, and they were bouncing around, and they had these dark robes with these hoods, and they were saying things like, how was it? What can you tell us? What'd you learn? And they had these little munchkin voices. One of them stepped forward and looked me up and down and had a bright smile on his face. These guys were absolutely stoked to see me. And he turned to the other two, and he goes, he doesn't remember us. And they just all started giggling uproariously. And I was like, well, guys, it's just this, all of a sudden, things are very different for me. I kind of remember you, and I'm sorry, no offense, but I'm trying to get sorted out here. And that is something on the other side. We have to decompress. We have to reintegrate with the other side, with the spirit side. And I was going through that, and they were just giggling and bouncing around, and they were sweethearts. You might call them guides or helpers or even angels. They seem to keep our life going. They probably upgrade, probably repair us, and things like that. I got that impression. I'd been in that facility before. And then there was this other guy, and he was in the background at first. And he was this tall, spinning, wispy guy made out of energy, like a little tornado. And he had a giant smile on his face. And when he came forward, I was looking at somebody underwater, and parts of them were spinning, and then they would separate, and then parts would catch back up, and then he'd keep moving. And it was a very unusual experience. And he came forward, and I had no fears at all. There was no confusion. It was like I'd just gotten off a roller coaster, and I'd gotten back to the landing, and all my friends were there, and they were like super stoked and wanted to know how was the roller coaster ride. And that's the extent of the seriousness of it, of being back in that place. And this tall, wispy guy, he came forward, and as he got close to me, my chest just expanded and my throat tightened. Like you're watching a feel-good movie about a dog being reunited with a little boy, and they'd been lost in the woods or something. And, you just want to start crying because it's so beautiful. And that is the feeling I got when this tall, wispy guy came close. I felt like I wanted to fall down on my knees and uncontrollably cry from love. There was so much love coming from this being that it was overwhelming. It was paralyzing. So he came forward, and the little guys were giggling the whole time and talking to each other and bouncing around. And whenever I said anything, he had this laugh, and I could feel his laugh inside me. That's how strong it was. And he was chuckling the whole time, and it wasn't very organized. It didn't seem like there was any purpose. And so I just came from the human world where we do things and we accomplish things. And so I was on to the next thing, and I had just had a taste of that euphoric heavenly realm. And so I knew there was limitless possibilities. And I was like, okay, eventually I'm going to check out of this facility, whatever's going on here. And so I said, what's next? A review of my life? Would you guys like to get started with that? The big wispy guy, he just cracked up. He just laughed, and it was a belly laugh. I said, well, that's a good sign, you know? And then he said, well, sure, let's do that. How do you want to start? And I told some stories, you know, not anything profound like something I did affected somebody else. You know, this real life review stuff. I was just telling stories about a job that I wished I'd taken because my wife wanted to live on an island with the Park Service, and a couple of other things. And then I looked around and I realized nobody's listening. They're still chuckling and bouncing around, and the big guy is kind of chuckling at what the little guys are doing. And I've realized they don't care. I'm not doing anything here of significance. And you know, the big guy proved that. He said, okay, that's enough. And he stepped forward and he goes, time to go back. I was shocked. I was like, dude, what? And he says, you got to go back. You got things to do. And I'm like, I'm not going back there. There's no way I'm going back there. And it was to the point was like, you don't understand. That's really a terrible existence. It's not a good place to be. And he said, yeah, I know, but you got things to do, and you're going back. And he came forward, and this is a realization that, you know, we have a lot of independence down here. We have this free will, but you know, there's a higher power, and they control our place in the universe. And when he said, you're going back, I watched the room start to dematerialize, start to break up. He was changing the dimension that I was in, I was going to be in. And I dropped away into darkness. And I got down near my body, and the place near our bodies, which we all have names for, a place that was lonely. It was dismal, and it was a horrific sinking feeling. And you don't want to be there. I've described it as a place directly next to where we are in the physical, because that's the only place I experienced it. I'm convinced I was moving through different realms, different dimensions. I was in a heavenly realm, and then I was in a in-between type place. And then as I got near my body, I was in that place that we don't want anything to do with, or I was near it. So I was back in my body, and I slowly woke up. I could see the equipment spitting out numbers in the dark, and I could slowly stay awake. And finally I was awake, and I was looking around. It was still dark out, and a nurse walked by, and she's like, you're awake? And she was like really shocked. I said, yes, I am. I need to talk to you. What am I doing back here? And I unloaded on her because I was pissed. I had been home. I'd been with the coolest dudes you'd ever meet in your life. There wasn't any downside to any of them. Their intentions were just as sweet as butter in every way. And so, yeah, I told her, what am I doing back here? I was pissed, and I said, I was out of here. I was home. I was finally home. And how did I get back here? I had died. I had bought the farm. I was absolutely convinced of it. And she goes, honey, you've been in escrow, but you fell out of escrow, and now you're back with us, and you're gonna have to get your head around that. And that was really a really good gift, because she grounded me immediately, and she said, look, you're Bill again, and Bill's obviously got something to do, so get your head around it and get back to work. And the doctors came in, and the rest of the staff came in. I'm just like, blah, 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 blah. I was with these guys, and they were the coolest guys, and you won't believe it. And there was these little munchkin guys, and they were sweethearts. And then there was this tall guy, and he just loved me. And my family came around, and I kept up with it. And, you know, looking at their faces, I could see disappointment, like, he's lost his mind. And so I let up on them. And when I got back to work, all the guys wanted to know, dude, what happened? What went on? I didn't hold back. I told about everything I saw, and I told them, this is a game we're in. We're all playing parts here, but this isn't who we are. Nobody's ready to hear that. So I talked like that for a couple of weeks, and then the word kind of creeped down from the upper ranks to, you're sounding a little bit like a kook. And this was 1994. Nobody was talking about near-death experiences. So I got the hint to zip it, and so I dummied up for about 15 years. And in 2010, I retired. And, around 2012, this just came roaring back. 2011, 2012, this whole thing that I sort of put away came roaring back. And I went looking for answers. I heard about this thing with Rick Strassman's work in the University of New Mexico with the DMT experiments. And when I read his book, his volunteers saw things exactly like I saw. The three little hooded guys and the tall, wispy guy that was in charge. That just blew my mind. It just floored me. I was like, what is going on here? These people are having the same experience I had, and I wasn't being injected with DMT. I was just really ill and had this experience where I left my body. And so those things are related.
You mentioned Rick Strassman.
Yeah.
And Rick Strassman did all those DMT psychedelic studies where people said that they were blasted into this other realm that had more reality than this place we're experiencing, that place felt more real than here. And I'm curious, you called this a game. How much reality do you give here, Earth, versus where you were?
It's like a movie. If you watch the movie The Wizard of Oz, in my near-death experience, Dorothy goes through a similar thing. She's in that vortex of the tornado, and she's in that house, and she's in a dark black and white world. It's a drab lifestyle, and part of the window breaks off and hits her in the head, and then she peels away, and she's having a near-death experience after that. And the house lands in this place, and the door opens, and all these colors come out, and these giant flowers. A lot of NDEers talk about these giant flowers and orbs around them. And she walks outside, and there's all these giggling, playful munchkins, and they come at her in groups of 3. And when she's ready, this higher being shows up. Linda comes in this colorful orb. And she's got a wonderful disposition, and she sends Dorothy on her way, and she sticks by her as she goes through her journey, and she needs her. She's always there. Dorothy picks up with a guy looking for a brain, a guy looking for a heart, a guy looking for courage. If we live our lives, get control of our thoughts, go with that right brain, with that divine energy, the divine vibration, and learn to live our lives from the intelligence of the heart, of kindness and sweetness and patience and compassion. And if we take this journey without fear, with courage, then we get to go home anytime we want, any of us. And there's no place like home.
Speaking of movies, when I was a kid, there was this trailer for a movie called Flatliners, where you had these medical students stopping each other's hearts and then resuscitating one another a minute later, just so they could experience the mystery of the afterlife.
Yeah.
And something about that stirred my soul. I think so many of us have that deep longing to experience the great unknown, to peer into that mystery of life, that higher place, that true spiritual home, and to capture that radical life transformation that comes with it. There's this new way to experience this realm, but it only works for people who are high in trait openness. That means artists and risk takers, very open-minded people who are also high in empathy and who also get goosebumps with great music. And apparently for these people, it's been discovered that a very particular kind of sound can trigger mystical, out-of-body experiences. And it's because these people have a higher volume of fibers running from their auditory cortex to the emotional centers of their brain and to their pineal glands where DMT is released, which we were talking about. And DMT is that, most psychedelic substance known to man that's released when you dream and during near-death experiences.
Very true.
So many people who've had near-death experiences say that this app for your phone called Most High gets them to that same place that they experience in the afterlife, because this app is using these sounds to help people trigger into the mystical out-of-body experience. And people even feel the presence of lost loved ones when they use it.
That's super cool. They help a lot of people.
Maybe because of courageous people like you sharing their stories and new tech like this Most High app, a lot more people will get to experience what you've been talking about. That out-of-body experience. That higher place. That transcendent realm. That transformative grace. That ecstatic high. That overwhelming love. In my dream, I was sure a distant light, the great unknown, an ancient voice calls my name, a need so deep I can't explain. Love calls my soul, take me home to a higher place now. I'm coming home. Yeah, I see a higher place now. If you'd like to see the full uncut version of this near-death experience, it's in our app and the link is in our description. And if you'd like to know what to watch next on YouTube, well, maybe the heavenly angels have something in mind, and this video right here might be it. Give it a click.